Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant and watched the stars through the main view screen. The ship was quiet except for the soft hum of the engines. His crew worked at their stations, checking reports that came in from across the galaxy. Each report brought worse news than the last. The war was coming whether they wanted it or not. Captain Lisa Torres walked onto the bridge carrying a datapad. Her face was serious as she approached Jake. "Commander, we just got another message from the outer colonies. The Zephyrians destroyed 3 more worlds this week." Jake took the pad and read the report. The numbers were bad. Very bad. 17 different alien species had already fallen to the Zephyrian Empire. Each one had tried to fight back. Each one had failed. "How long do we have?" Jake asked. "Maybe 2 weeks before they reach our space," Lisa answered. "The Galactic Council is already talking about surrender." Jake shook his head. He had seen what surrender meant to the Zephyrians. It meant slavery at best, extinction at worst. The peaceful Altarians had tried to surrender 3 months ago. The Zephyrians had killed them all anyway, just to make a point. The communication system beeped. Admiral Ryan Burke's voice filled the bridge. "All ship commanders report to the Liberty for immediate briefing." "This is not a drill." Jake handed the datapad back to Lisa. "Get us to the flagship. Full speed." 20 minutes later, Jake sat in the briefing room aboard the UES Liberty. Around him were the commanders of all 47 ships in humanity's war fleet. Some looked confident, others looked scared. All of them knew what they were facing. Admiral Burke stood at the front of the room. Behind him was a large screen showing the Zephyrian fleet. The image made Jake's stomach drop. Thousands of ships filled the display. Each ship was bigger than any human vessel. Their weapons could turn planets into glass. "Gentlemen and ladies," Admiral Burke began, "I'll give it to you straight. The Zephyrians have given us the same choice they gave everyone else. Surrender or die." Captain Amy Rogers raised her hand. "What did Earth Command say?" Burke smiled for the first time that day. President Maria Gonzalez had a very short answer. She said, "We don't run from bullies. We never have and we never will." A murmur went through the room. Some commanders nodded. Others looked more worried. "What about the other council races?" asked Captain Helen Davis. "Are they going to help us fight?" "No," Burke answered. "The Altarians are evacuating their remaining colonies. The Centauri Collective is hiding behind their force fields. The Vegan Alliance has already started peace talks with the Zephyrians." Jake felt anger building in his chest. Humanity had joined the Galactic Council only 30 years ago. They had tried to be good neighbors. They had shared their technology and helped build trade routes. But when the real test came, humanity stood alone. "So it's just us," Jake said. "Just us," Burke confirmed. 47 human ships against 3,000 Zephyrian vessels. The room fell silent. Everyone was doing the math. The numbers were not good. Chief Engineer Tony Wright spoke up from the back of the room. "Admiral, what about the project we've been working on, the special modifications?" Burke nodded. "That's why we're here, Tony. Tell them what you've done." Tony stood up and walked to the front. He was a small man with grease stains on his uniform. But Jake knew he was the smartest engineer in the fleet. "We've been studying human biology and psychology for months," Tony explained. "The other alien races don't understand what makes us different. They think war is about bigger guns and stronger shields." "Isn't it?" asked Captain Davis. "Not for humans," Tony replied. "Every other species in the galaxy fights until the odds turn against them. Then they surrender or retreat. It's logical behavior," Jake was starting to understand. "But humans don't work that way." "Exactly," Tony said with a grin. "Humans get more dangerous when they're cornered. We fight harder when things look hopeless. It's how we evolved on Earth." Dr. Karin Miller, the fleet's expert on alien behavior, joined Tony at the front. "I've studied every Zephyrian battle in the past 1,000 years. They've never faced an enemy that wouldn't quit. Every species they conquered gave up once the situation became hopeless." "What are you saying?" Captain Rogers asked. "I'm saying they've never fought humans before. Dr. Miller answered. They don't know what we're capable of when our backs are against the wall. Admiral Burke stepped forward again. The modifications Tony mentioned aren't to our weapons or shields. They're to our communication systems. We're going to show the Zephyrians something they've never seen before. Jake leaned forward in his chair. What kind of something? The fighting spirit of Earth, Burke said. Every human who ever stood against impossible odds. Every warrior who ever chose death over surrender. Every person who ever said no when the whole world said yes. The room was quiet again, but this time it felt different. The fear was still there, but something else was growing alongside it. Something that had been sleeping in human hearts since they left Earth. When do we fight? Jake asked. The Zephyrian fleet will reach our position in 6 days, Burke answered. We'll meet them at the edge of human space. Right here, at the line we will not let them cross. Captain Torres stood up. What if we lose? Burke looked at each commander in turn. His voice was steady and strong when he answered. Then we lose. Fighting, and we make sure the Zephyrians remember the price of threatening humanity. Jake felt something stir in his chest. It was the same feeling his ancestors must have felt at places like Thermopylae and the Alamo, the feeling of standing up to a bully, no matter how big they were. Any other questions? Burke asked. The room was silent. Then get back to your ships. Prepare your crews. In 6 days, we show the galaxy what humans are really made of. As Jake walked back to his shuttle, he thought about Earth, about the green hills and blue oceans that had raised humanity from cave dwellers to star travelers. The Zephyrians thought they were facing just another weak species. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The space around the human fleet suddenly filled with light. Bright flashes appeared everywhere as ships began dropping out of hyperspace. But these were not human ships. These were something else entirely. Lieutenant Commander Amy Rogers sat at her tactical station aboard the UES Defiant. Her screen lit up with red dots, hundreds of them, then thousands. She blinked hard and checked her sensors again. The numbers couldn't be right. Commander Morrison, she called out. You need to see this? Jake walked over to her station and looked at the display. His face went pale. The Zephyrian fleet was arriving, and it was even bigger than they had expected. How many? He asked quietly. 3,000 ships, sir. Maybe more. They're still coming through. Jake watched as more enemy vessels appeared. Each one was huge. The smallest Zephyrian ship was twice the size of the Defiant. The largest ones looked like floating cities made of metal and death. On the main screen, the enemy fleet spread out like a dark cloud. Their ships moved in perfect formation. Every vessel knew exactly where to go. It was like watching a deadly dance that had been practiced for centuries. Captain Lisa Torres called from the communication station. Sir, we're getting reports from all our ships. Everyone sees the same thing. Which is? We're outnumbered 70-1. The bridge fell. Silent. Even the soft humming of the engines seemed too loud. Jake looked at his crew. These were good people. They had families back on Earth. They didn't deserve to die in a hopeless battle, but they were here anyway. The communication system crackled. To life, a voice spoke in perfect English, but it sounded wrong. Too cold. Too mechanical. Human vessels. This is War Prime Thaxel of the Zephyrian Empire. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed. Jake activated his own communication. System, this is Commander Morrison of the human fleet. We're listening. Good, you show wisdom. Lower your shields and prepare to be boarded. Your species will serve the Empire as workers, resist, and you will all die. Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was watching him, waiting to see what he would do. We need time to consider your offer, Jake said. You have one of your hours, then we begin the killing. The communication ended. Jake turned to Lisa. Get me Admiral Burke on a secure channel. A minute later, Admiral Burke's face appeared on the screen. Behind him, Jake could see the busy Bridge of the Liberty. You saw them? Burke asked. Hard to miss. Admiral, we can't win this fight, not with conventional tactics. I know. But we're not using conventional tactics. Jake frowned. Sir? Jake. How many people lived on Earth when we first went to space? The question surprised him. About 8 billion, I think. And how many of them were warriors? Jake thought about it. Maybe a few million in active military service? Wrong, Burke said with a smile. All of them. Every single human who ever stood up to a bully. Every parent who protected their child. Every person who said no when someone tried to hurt what they loved. They were all warriors. I don't understand. You will. Burke out. The screen went dark. Jake stared at it for a moment, then turned back to his crew. Captain Helen Davis's voice came over the fleet communication system. All ships, this is the UE Salcon. I'm picking up refugee vessels on long-range sensors. Looks like Altarian evacuation ships. Jake switched to the refugee frequency. The voice that answered was weak and frightened. Human ships, this is Transport 7 of the Altarian Exodus fleet. Please help us. The Zephyrians are hunting us. This is Commander Morrison. What happened to your defense fleet? Gone, all gone. A single Zephyrian cruiser destroyed 12 of our warships in minutes. Their weapons cut through our shields like they weren't there. Jake felt cold. If a single enemy ship could destroy 12 Altarian vessels, what would 3,000 do? To the human fleet? How many survivors do you have? He asked. 2 million refugees across 50 ships. We're the last of our people. Jake closed his eyes. 2 million aliens who had done nothing wrong except trust that someone would protect them. Just like the humans back on Earth were trusting their fleet to protect them. This is Admiral Burke to all human vessels. The Admiral's voice filled the communication channels. Prep for battle stations in 30 minutes. All crew chiefs report to your commanders. Jake turned to his crew. You heard the Admiral. Battle stations in 30 minutes. Chief Engineer Tony Wright appeared on Jake's personal communication screen. Commander, we've finished the modifications. All ships are ready. What exactly did you modify, Tony? Tony grinned. You'll see, sir. Let's just say we've given every ship in the fleet access to something special, something very human. Before Jake could ask more questions, another voice filled the bridge. This one was different from War Prime Thaxel. It sounded younger, more excited. Human Commander, this is Subprime Kekstar. I studied your species when you joined the Council. You seem like reasonable beings. Why do you choose death over service? Jake thought about the question. Why were they choosing to fight instead of surrender? The logical choice was clear. Serve the Empire and live. Fight and die. But humans had never been very logical. Because that's what humans do, Jake answered. We fight for what we believe in, even when you cannot win. Especially when we cannot win. There was silence from the Zephyrian fleet. Jake imagined alien minds trying to understand what he had just said. It probably made no sense to them. Dr. Karen Miller's voice came over the internal communication system. All commanders, I've been monitoring Zephyrian battle communications. They're confused by our behavior. Their tactical computers can't predict what we'll do next. Captain Amy Rogers looked up from her station. Commander, something's happening to the enemy formation. Jake looked at the main screen. The Zephyrian ships were moving into attack position. Massive weapons emerged from their hulls. Energy readings spiked across the human sensors. All ships, this is Admiral Burke. Remember who you are? Remember where you come from. In 15 minutes, we show the galaxy what it means to threaten humanity. Jake sat down in his command chair. Around him, his crew prepared for battle. They all knew the odds. They all knew how this would probably end, but they were ready anyway, because they were human. The battle began at exactly 8 in the morning, ship time. War Prime Thaxel opened a communication channel to the human fleet. His voice carried the cold confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. Human Commander, your hour is finished. Will you surrender now? Admiral Burke's response echoed across all frequencies. Every human ship heard it. Every Zephyrian vessel heard it too. You picked the wrong species to threaten. We're humans, and we're here to teach you what that means. War Prime Thaxel made a sound that might have been laughter. So be it, all ships open fire. Show these mammals what real power looks like. The Zephyrian fleet fired as one. 3,000 ships unleashed their weapons at the same moment. Plasma bolts filled the space between the fleets. Each bolt carried enough energy to destroy a city. Thousands of them raced toward the tiny human formation. On the UES Defiant, Commander Jake Morrison watched death approaching on his main screen. The plasma storm looked like a wall of fire. It should have been the end of the human fleet, but something impossible happened instead. Captain Lisa Torres, commanding the escort group, shouted into her communication system. All ships execute pattern Delta, full speed ahead. Instead of running away from the deadly barrage, the human ships accelerated straight toward it. Every alien watching the battle expected to see the humans vaporized in seconds. But the human vessels began to dance. Lieutenant Sam Clark sat in his fighter cockpit aboard the carrier UES Hornet. When the order came, he pushed his engines to maximum power and dove into the plasma storm. Around him, other human pilots did the same thing. Yahoo! Sam screamed as he twisted his ship between two plasma bolts that passed close enough to melt his hull paint. This is better than riding tornadoes back home. The other human pilots were laughing too. They flew through the deadly energy barrage like it was a game. They rolled and twisted and spun their ships in ways that should have killed them. But humans had learned to fly by studying birds and dreaming of touching the sky on the Zephyrian. Command ship War Prime Thaxel stared at his tactical display in confusion. His weapons should have destroyed the entire human fleet. Instead, every human ship was still intact. Still moving, still fighting. Subprime Kekstar, explain this? He demanded. I cannot, War Prime. Our weapons are functioning perfectly. The humans are simply avoiding them. No species can move that fast. Their pilots should be dead from the acceleration forces alone, but the human pilots were very much alive. Lieutenant Danny Foster spun his fighter in a complete loop around. A plasma bolt, then fired his own weapons at the Zephyrian ship that had targeted him. His shot hit the enemy vessel's shield generator. Got you! Danny shouted. Eat that, alien scum! The Zephyrian ship's shields flickered and failed. Other human fighters immediately focused their fire on the vulnerable vessel. Within seconds, the enemy ship exploded. It was the first Zephyrian ship destroyed in over 200 years. Commander Morrison activated his ship's communication system. But instead of talking to the enemy, he spoke to his own fleet. All ships, broadcast on all frequencies. Let them hear what humans sound like when we're angry. What followed made every alien in the galaxy stop what they were doing and listen. In horror. Every human ship began transmitting the same message. It wasn't a surrender or a plea for mercy. It was something the galaxy had never heard before. Remember the Alamo? Captain Amy Rogers shouted from her tactical station. Remember Pearl Harbor. Remember 9/11s. Remember what happens when you attack. Our home, the human voices carried across space like thunder. Each ship added their own battle cry. Names of battles from Earth's history. Places where humans had stood against impossible odds and refused to give up. Remember Thermopylae? Called out Captain Helen Davis from the UES Falcon. Remember Gettysburg? Shouted Chief Engineer Tony Wright. Remember D-Day? Added Dr. Karen. Miller, the Zephyrians had never heard anything like it. In their culture, war was cold and logical. You fought until the odds turned against you, then you surrendered or retreated. But these humans were doing something completely insane. They were getting angrier as the battle continued. War Prime Thaxel tried to understand what he was hearing. What are they saying? What do these words mean? Subprime Kekstar consulted his database of human history. His face grew pale as he read the results. War Prime, these are references to battles from their homeworld. Battles where humans fought against superior numbers and refused to surrender. Did they win these battles? Some? They won, some they lost. But in every case, they made the enemy pay a terrible price. On the UES Defiant, Jake Morrison felt something he had never experienced before. It was like fire in his blood. Every human ancestor who had ever stood up to a bully was standing with him now. Every warrior who had ever said no to oppression was lending him strength, The human ships stopped just dodging the Zephyrian weapons. They began to attack, but they didn't attack like any civilized species would. They attacked like Earth's apex predator, finally unleashed after centuries of trying to be peaceful. Captain Ben Murphy of the heavy cruiser used Thunderbolt led the charge. His ship was damaged and his weapons were overheating, but he didn't slow. "Down, all power to forward guns," he shouted. "We're going straight through them." The Thunderbolt charged directly at a Zephyrian battlecruiser. The enemy ship fired everything it had at the approaching human vessel. Plasma bolts and particle beams hammered the Thunderbolt's shields. The ship's hull began to glow red from the heat. But Captain Murphy didn't stop. He didn't even slow down. "Lieutenant Grace Parker, fire everything we have," he ordered his weapons officer. "Sir, if we fire all weapons at once, we'll overload the ship's power systems. Then we'll fight in the dark." "Fire!" The Thunderbolt unleashed every weapon at point-blank range. The Zephyrian ship's shields collapsed under the massive barrage. The enemy vessel began to break apart. Across the battlefield, other human ships were doing the same thing. They weren't trying to win through superior technology or clever tactics. They were winning through pure, savage determination. The Zephyrians began to experience something their species had never felt before. Fear. Real, gut-deep terror of an enemy that simply would not stop coming. What happened next changed the way the entire galaxy thought about war. The human fleet didn't try to retreat. They didn't ask for mercy. They didn't attempt to negotiate. Instead, they did something that made every watching alien civilization question everything they knew about combat. They became the monsters their ancestors had always been. Captain Ben Murphy's ship, the UES Thunderbolt, was burning. Half his crew was dead, his weapons were offline, his life support was failing. Any reasonable commander would have surrendered or tried to escape, but Captain Murphy was human. "All remaining crew to the bridge," he announced over the ship's communication system. "We're going to ram the biggest Zephyrian ship we can find." Lieutenant Grace Parker, his weapons officer, looked at him with wide eyes. "Sir, that's suicide." "No," Murphy replied with a cold smile. "That's justice." The Thunderbolt changed course and aimed directly at the Zephyrian command dreadnought. The massive enemy ship was 10 times larger than the human cruiser. Its weapons could have destroyed a dozen ships like the Thunderbolt, but size didn't matter anymore. War Prime. Thaxel watched in disbelief as the damaged human ship accelerated toward his flagship. "What are they doing? Why don't they surrender?" "I don't know, War Prime," Subprime Kekstar answered. His voice was shaking. "This behavior is not in any of our tactical databases." The Thunderbolt crashed into the Zephyrian dreadnought at full speed. The explosion lit up space like a new star. Both ships died in the collision, but something else died with them. The Zephyrian belief that they were unbeatable. Across the battlefield, other human ships saw what Captain Murphy had done. Instead of being horrified, they cheered. "That's how we do it," shouted Lieutenant Sam Clark from his fighter. "If we're going down, we're taking them with us." The human pilots began copying Murphy's tactic. When their ships were too damaged to fight, they turned them into weapons. Fighter after fighter dove into Zephyrian vessels, causing explosions that destroyed ships 100 times their size. Commander Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the Defiant as his pilots sacrificed themselves. Each death hurt his heart, but he felt proud too. These people were showing the galaxy what humans were really made of. "Commander," called Captain Amy Rogers from her tactical station. "Fighter pilot Danny Foster's ship is disabled. He's floating, dead in space." Jake looked at the main screen. Foster's fighter was drifting helplessly between the two fleets. Its engines were gone, its weapons were destroyed. The young pilot should have waited for rescue, but Lieutenant Danny Foster was human, too. "I'm not done yet," Foster's voice came over the communication system. He had ejected from his ship and was floating in his spacesuit. In his hand, he carried a plasma cutter from his emergency kit. "Foster, what are you doing?" Jake demanded. "Going to work, sir. See that Zephyrian cruiser over there?" "I'm going to pay them a visit." Jake watched in amazement as Foster used his suit's small thrusters to move toward the enemy ship. The Zephyrians didn't even notice him. He was just a tiny human in a spacesuit. What threat could he possibly pose? They found out 5 minutes later when their ship's reactor exploded from the inside. Foster's final transmission became famous throughout human space. "See you in hell, you alien sons of bitches?" The Zephyrian fleet began to panic. This wasn't how war was supposed to work. Enemies were supposed to surrender when the situation became hopeless. They weren't supposed to become more dangerous, but humans had learned to fight on a world where everything wanted to kill them. They had evolved from prey animals that refused to give up. When cornered, they didn't become weak. They became deadly. Admiral Burke watched the battle from the bridge of the Liberty. His tactical officer reported the impossible numbers. "Sir, we've destroyed over 800 enemy ships. We've lost only 12 of our own." Burke nodded. The numbers should have been reversed. The Zephyrians had better weapons, better shields, better technology, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. "Admiral," Dr. Karen Miller called from her station. "I'm monitoring Zephyrian communications. They single quotes read. They're afraid." "Of us?" "Yes, sir. For the first time in their species' history, they're experiencing genuine terror. They don't understand how we can keep fighting when the logical choice is surrender." Burke smiled grimly. "They're about to learn something new." On the Zephyrian command ship, War Prime Thaxel was trying to understand what was happening to his invincible fleet. Ship after ship was being destroyed by enemies that shouldn't have been able to hurt them. "Subprime, explain to me how these humans are winning." Kekstar studied his readings. "War Prime, I think I understand now. Every other species we've conquered fought like us. They used logic. They calculated odds. When defeat became certain, they surrendered. And the humans? The humans don't fight like that. They fight like wild animals defending their young. Logic means nothing to them. Odds mean nothing to them. They only care about hurting us as much as possible before they die." Thaxel felt something he had never experienced before. Cold fear crept up his spine. "How do we defeat an enemy that won't surrender?" "I don't know, War Prime. I don't think anyone knows." Captain Helen Davis of the UES Falcon led a group of destroyers against a Zephyrian battle group. Her ships were outnumbered 5-1, but she didn't care. "All ships, follow my lead. We're going to show these aliens what humans do to bullies." The human ships attacked with a fury that terrified the Zephyrians. They didn't try to preserve their vessels or minimize casualties. They fought like berserkers from ancient Earth myths. When the Falcon's main guns overheated, Davis switched to secondary weapons. When those failed, she used her ship's mining lasers. When everything else was gone, she ordered her crew to fire the emergency flares. "Ma'am, flares can't hurt their ships," her weapons officer protested. "I don't care," Davis replied. "If we're going to die, we're going to die fighting. Fire everything." The Zephyrians, watching this display, began to break. Their commanders started issuing retreat orders. Some ships began to flee the battlefield, but War Prime Thaxel had one last desperate plan. "All remaining ships, focus fire on the human flagship. If we kill their leader, maybe the rest will surrender." 1,000 Zephyrian ships turned their weapons toward Admiral Burke's ship, the Liberty. Enough firepower to destroy a moon concentrated on one target, but Admiral Burke wasn't worried. He was human, and humans had been fighting impossible odds since they first stood upright on the plains of Africa. 1,000 Zephyrian ships fired at Admiral Burke's flagship at the same moment. The combined energy blast was enough to crack a planet in half. The Liberty should have been vaporized instantly, but something extraordinary happened instead. Every human ship in the fleet moved to protect their admiral. They formed a wall of metal and courage between the enemy fire and the Liberty. Ship after ship took hits meant for the flagship. They absorbed the terrible energy and kept flying. Commander Jake Morrison pushed the Defiant directly into the path of a plasma bolt aimed at Burke's ship. The blast tore through his hull and killed half his crew, but the Liberty survived. This is for Earth," Jake shouted as his dying ship fired its last shot at the nearest Zephyrian vessel. Captain Lisa Torres did the same thing. So did Captain Helen Davis, so did every human commander in the fleet. They threw their ships between the enemy and their leader like shields. Made of steel and human will, War Prime Thaxel watched in horror as his perfect attack failed. The human flagship was still intact, still fighting, still refusing to give up. "How are they still alive?" he screamed at his tactical officer. "They're protecting each other, War Prime. I've never seen anything like it. They're willing to die for their leader." But that wasn't quite right. The humans weren't just dying. For Admiral Burke, they were dying for the idea he represented. The idea that some things were worth fighting for no matter what the cost. On the bridge of the Liberty, Admiral Burke felt tears in his eyes as he watched his people sacrifice themselves. Each death was like a knife in his heart. But he also felt something else: pride, pure, burning pride in the species that had raised him. "All remaining ships," he said into his communication system. "This is Admiral Burke. I want you to listen carefully. Today we've shown the galaxy what humans can do when we're pushed too far, but the battle isn't over yet." Across the battlefield, the surviving human ships waited for his words. "We came to the stars looking for friends. We found them among the peaceful races of the Council. But we also brought something else from Earth. We brought the spirit of every human who ever stood up to a bully and said, 'No more.'" The communication channels crackled with static, but Burke's voice came through clearly. "Today, the Zephyrians learn what happens when you threaten our home, when you hurt our friends, when you try to make us kneel." Admiral Burke looked at the tactical display. The human fleet was down to 23 ships. The Zephyrians still had over 2,000, but the numbers didn't matter anymore. All ships, final attack. Show them what Earth's children can do. What followed was the most savage 18 minutes in galactic history. The remaining human ships attacked with the fury of wounded animals. They had no hope of survival, so they focused on one simple goal: make the enemy remember this day forever. Captain Amy Rogers, now commanding the Defiant after Jake Morrison's death, led the final charge. Her ship was held together by emergency welds and determination, but she pushed it to maximum speed. "For Jake!" she screamed as she fired everything she had at a Zephyrian battlecruiser. "For all the humans who died here today." The enemy ship exploded in a ball of fire. Rogers immediately turned toward another target. Around her, the other human ships did the same. They fought like demons. They fought like angels of death. They fought like humans who had nothing left to lose. War Prime Thaxel made a decision that no Zephyrian commander had made in 2,000 years. He ordered a full retreat. "All ships, withdraw immediately. Get us away from these monsters." But it was too late for an orderly retreat. The Zephyrian fleet was in full panic. Ships collided with each other as they tried to escape. Commanders abandoned their posts. The most feared military force in the galaxy became a mob of terrified refugees. Thaxel himself, ejected from his command ship in an escape pod, his final transmission was heard across the entire galaxy. "Do not engage the humans. They are not like other species. They are death given form. They are madness with weapons. Stay away from their space. Stay away from their worlds. They are not civilized beings. They are monsters wearing the masks of people." When the battle ended, the impossible had happened. The mighty Zephyrian Empire, undefeated for 2 millennia, had been crushed by 47 human ships. Admiral Burke sat in his command chair and looked at the final casualty reports. Human losses: 15 ships destroyed, 8 heavily damaged, 237 crew members dead. Zephyrian losses: complete destruction of their war fleet. The numbers were so unbelievable that the Galactic Council initially refused to accept them. But the evidence was floating in space around them. The wreckage of 3,000 enemy ships told the story better than any report. Dr. Karen Miller's voice was quiet when she spoke. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 different Zephyrian colonies. They're asking for peace negotiations." Burke nodded slowly. "Tell them we'll talk. But on our terms." Across the galaxy, every intelligent species that had monitored the battle reached the same conclusion. The peaceful humans who had joined the Council 30 years ago had been hiding their true nature. They weren't just another civilized race seeking knowledge and friendship, they were predators. The most dangerous predators the galaxy had ever seen. Commander Jake Morrison, badly wounded but alive in the Defiance medical bay, managed to send one final message to Earth. Mission accomplished. The bullies have learned their lesson. Humanity is safe. President Maria Gonzalez received the message in her office on Earth. She looked out at the blue sky and green hills that had given birth to the human race. Her response became the foundation of Earth's new policy toward the galaxy. Today, the universe learned something important about us. We came to the stars in peace, and we still want peace. But anyone who threatens our home, our friends, or our values will discover what we're really capable of. We are the children of Earth. We bow to no one. The age of human expansion began not through conquest, but through respect earned in battle. Every species in the galaxy now knew one simple truth. Humans were the kind of neighbors you wanted as friends and never wanted as enemies. The war was over. Humanity had won, and the galaxy would never be the same.